cooperation within our in-group. Now, of course, that psychological feature of our minds evolved for small group cooperation, but today it has been exacted for the era of nation states. So the nation state, comprising tens or hundreds of millions of people that no one person could ever possibly meet, come to understand or talk to, that becomes, for our own minds, the relevant in-group. Now, that can have some rather negative or effects that sort of violate our expectation of rationality, because when we're receiving information from the outside world, if we receive something that makes our in-group look bad, our national in-group look bad, we're more likely to question it, to interrogate it, to try to find something wrong in it so that we have a reason to reject it. Whereas when information comes in that makes our in-group, our national in-group look good, we tend to just stamp it with the stamp of approval and move on without really interrogating it or checking to make sure that the information is actually accurate. So you can see how this operates when, from the very top level of government, when intelligence reports come in that an out-group is threatening, that sort of message is more likely to be accepted without the same kinds of strict scrutiny that you would expect for a message that would make the in-group seem negative in some way. For instance, a reminder about the failures of intelligence gathering during the war of aggression against Iraq starting in 2003. That sort of message, a reminder that U.S. intelligence produced a lot of mistaken beliefs among policymakers in the U.S., that kind of information is more likely to be interrogated strictly, trying to find anything that might be wrong about it, and also more likely to just be avoided because it makes people feel bad. It's something about the in-group, the nation, that makes us feel bad about ourselves. So intergroup bias, I think, is the key aspect of our evolved psychology that we have to understand and work around so that our thinking more closely approximates the rational ideal. Because right now, outside of our conscious awareness, our thinking is not living up to our ideals of rationality. Another important psychological bias that we all have to varying degrees is called the system justification tendency. And it, like everything else that we study in political psychology, more or less, you can boil it down to some ideas, some beliefs make us feel bad, makes us feel negative. And so we're more likely to reject that belief, to avoid it, to try to argue around it, so that we can restore our feelings to positive feelings. So system justification tendency refers to the difficulty that we have in accepting that any system in which we live, including a nation-state system, an economic system, even an international system in which our country, whichever it is, plays some given role, we're all motivated to try to find a way to believe that those systems are fundamentally just. Because believing that these systems in which we are entrenched are unjust, again, that makes us feel very bad. It makes us feel negative. It gives us negative affect. And to avoid it, we're more likely to come up with justifications that make it seem as though the systems that we live in are actually perfectly just. So basically, one way you can think of this is, ceteris paribus, everything else being equal, we're more likely, say someone like myself from the US, are more likely to believe the message that right now the U.S. is engaged in a justified war of defense against Iran, simply on the basis of that is a message, that is a belief that makes us feel better about ourselves and our own in-group, versus the far more accurate belief that the U.S. government has waged an illegal war of aggression against Iran with horrible consequences for the people of Iran, the people of the region, and eventually even the people of the U.S. themselves, that belief is more likely to make people experience negative affect, and solely on account of that, we're more likely to reject that belief. There are so many different psychological biases that I could talk about if I had more time, but you might look up a paper by Daniel Kahneman and a co-author from several years ago, a very short article that basically just went through a very long list of known psychological biases. And what the two authors found is that all of these biases tend to benefit hawks. That is, they tend to lead toward more hawkish foreign policies, to support more militaristic policies, to undergird more paranoid views of other countries, and to make them seem more threatening and more in need of a military deterrence, etc. Perhaps I'll just end on one final psychological bias to discuss with you that's quite relevant, and it's kind of a combination of many smaller biases, but together we call it naive realism. That most people are naive realists in that they don't think enough about the arbitrariness by which we came to believe what we believe today. We're all dependent on the sources of information that we use to develop our worldviews, but it's very easy to lose sight of that and instead to kind of have a default position or default belief that we believe what is true. That our belief about how the world works is just the reality. And then when it comes to try to understand people who disagree with us, the most rare explanation that we come up with is, people who disagree with us likely have had a very different, a radically different information exposure than we have. They were, perhaps born in a different country, raised with different foundational beliefs. They had different things taught to them in schools, different perspectives provided to them in the media, and that is why they have a radically different view of reality than we do. Instead of doing that, the naive realist typically will say, well, if someone disagrees with me, they must be stupid or evil, or in some way, self-interested. They're biased in some way, so they're failing to see the reality. But the more scary truth of the matter is that our beliefs are all dependent upon a fundamentally arbitrary process of information acquisition over our lives that involves all sorts of accidents, like where we happen to be born, what family did we happen to be born into, and what was their ideology, their religion. What did we learn from the schools we happen to go to? What did we learn from the media outlets that we happen to tune into? What did we learn from our peers? What did we learn from our professors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So it's very easy for this kind of radically incommensurate worldviews to develop. And then worse, naive realism makes the holders of these radically incommensurate worldviews see each other as just enemies that can't even be talked to, because their difference in belief must be due to their malice or bias or self-interest, etc. So all of these psychological biases, I think we can understand as demand-side biases. That is, in the human mind itself, these are biases that affect the way that we process information that we learn from the outside world. And when we're talking about political issues, of course, the primary means by which we get politically relevant information is through the news media. So the news media, of course, is the next place we should look to try to understand how we have arrived at the situation that we find ourselves in today, with this very glaring hypocrisy on the part of the U.S. government, for starters. And so then we have to look at the supply side. That is the available or easily accessible supply of politically relevant information, and how there may be biases in that supply. There was the great liberation psychologist Ignacio Martín Baró, who spoke of what he called the social lie. That is a kind of conventional wisdom that's widespread throughout societies that is most widely spread by news media outlets. And this social lie, in his view, is always a belief about the world that is beneficial to those with predominant power in society, but which does not help the majority of people in society really understand the reality in which they live. Well, he was talking about El Salvador, his native El Salvador in the 1980s, but I think we can all recognize that variations of what he called the social lie exist all over the world. And in the U.S. today, a big part of the ability of the U.S. government to wage wars of aggression is a media system that does not provide the average American or the masses of people living in the U.S. with a diversity of perspectives and the evidence on which those diversity of perspectives are based, so as to allow them to make up their own minds and develop their kind of an autonomous public opinion without, undue influence. Instead, the U.S. media system acts as a form of undue influence. Although, of course, we've seen some radical changes in the U.S. Media ecosystem since the era of what is called now the legacy media. However, those changes, while certainly they have introduced a great deal of diversity of perspective into the U.S. media system, we're nowhere near the ideal of a perfectly free marketplace of ideas that so many people have written over the years is really the foundation of the U.S. system and really the foundation of all liberal democratic systems. The belief that, in the words of Judge Learned Hand, it is only through a multitude of tongues that we have any chance of discerning the truth about the world. Well, instead, we don't have that multitude of tongues. We still have what a group of political scientists who have been studying political participation over the decades call an unheavenly chorus that sings with a upper class accent. That is, the predominant views that are still found in the U.S. media system overall are views held by the most powerful and the wealthiest members of American society, despite the fact that we have the internet and social media, because now instead of having a media company owner, like someone who owns a newspaper or a TV station in the past, selecting the editors and from there influencing the people hired as journalists and then, of course, influencing their coverage, etc. We now have owners of social media companies which can change their algorithms to prioritize messages that are in keeping with the conventional wisdom or the administration's desired understanding of events and deprioritize critical voices. So again, we're still quite far from a true free marketplace of ideas. And the pressures operating on the media system to make a very long and complicated and detailed story short all tend to produce perspectives on events outside of the U.S. that make U.S. foreign policy seem like the only correct thing to do, whereas contrary perspectives that would paint perhaps, for instance, the illegal war of aggression on Iran as an illegal war of aggression on Iran, illegal not only under international law because it is an obvious violation of the UN Charter, but of course also illegal under U.S. domestic law because in the United States Constitution, ratified treaties like the UN Charter are considered to be the supreme law of the land. But messages like that are far less available in the U.S. media system, far less likely for your average person of average political interest to encounter, consider, and perhaps be influenced by. So I guess in conclusion, I would just say that there are probably other speakers who are focusing on the strategic considerations, the purported strategic considerations influencing the U.S. in its war on Iran. But I wanted to just add to that by focusing focusing on some of the psychological aspects here. You have on the supply side a media ecosystem that overwhelmingly presents perspectives that are in accord with the administration's beliefs. And then on the demand side, you have a number of psychological biases that make people more likely to support narratives that make their in-group, their nation look good, their government look good, system justification that tends to make people want.
Right. Now, we have heard the professor's presentation mainly to say something and to tell us something which is quite clear. Well, he's from the academic viewpoint to explain that how you could manage the psychological thinking and effect of the crowd. This very much depends on what you feed and how you feed them through media. So therefore, the public is very dependent upon what sort of information to be provided. And in fact, that is a very interesting perspective. And in fact, from all we know, as I have just opened in my opening remark, that we learned it from the news. The news has said that, the US had bombed the Iran. Now, how people suffer there, whether or not, that sort of the degree of the report is, how authentic it is, it really depends on how you pitch the news and the news to be released. So that is a very interesting perspective again. Now, from having said all that, and thank you for the presentation, which is very enlightening and in fact, eye-opening for us to think of today's, the media management and how influential it is to us in the modern world. Now, if I may just reshuffle the arrangement of the speaker a little bit, because we have 3 videos presentation. In order to retain the attention of the audience here, I would like to invite Honorable Dominic Lee to let us share his view about the expansionism and also the militarism in light of the modern nowadays development internationally. Now, if I may just pass the mic to you. Thank you, Dominic.
Thank you so much. It's my greatest honor to be able to present in this forum. And today we're talking about age of militarism and expansionism. A lot of people talk about what the threat the humanity is facing, the greatest threat to humanity right now we're facing. In my view, it's not terrorism. It's not instability. It's not the nations that Western powers love to condemn. I think the greatest threat to human rights right now is militarism. The doctrine of peace can be delivered at the barrel of a gun, that sovereignty can be overridden by a superior firepower, and that lives of some people are worth more than the lives of others simply because where they were born. These are the lies that shape our world order. So today, I think our panel speaker is going to challenge this. When did liberation become the word painted on the side of a cruise missile? How did democracy become banner under which sovereign nations are dismantled? And how did freedom become justification for occupations that last not months, not years, but generations? Well, let's look at the facts right now. Let's not look at the slogans, not just the facts. The United States today maintains over 750 military installations in more than 80 countries. Its defense spending dwarfs that of the next 10 nations combined, with Congress pushing for over $1 trillion in military expenditure. This is the country that tells the world it is a force for peace while operating history's largest war machine. And what has the colossal expenditure delivered? Well, first of all, it delivered 20 years of war in Afghanistan, a nation left in ruins. It delivered the destruction of Libya, once Africa's highest standard of living, now a land of chaos. It delivered Iraq, a war built on lies that cost over 1 million lives, for which not a single leader has faced justice so far. And today, at this very moment, it is delivering something far worse. The current US-Israeli war on Iran has spread across at least a dozen countries. The world's major oil artery has been blocked, and it killed more than 2,300 people in the region. Let us remember how this started. Iran and US held indirect nuclear negotiation in February, which saw substantial progress. According to the foreign minister of Oman, who served as the mediator of the talks, just before the strikes began on 27 February, Oman's foreign minister said a breakthrough has been reached and that Iran had agreed to both never stockpile enriched uranium and to full verification by the IAEA. He said peace was within reach. And yet just one day later, the surprise US-Israeli attack on 28th of February assassinated Khamenei and killed other Iranian officials and civilians, and have since damaged military bases, government facilities, schools, hospitals, and cultural heritage sites. So when peace was within reach, the US chose war. And what has this war delivered to the Iranian people? At least 1,444 people have been killed and 18,551 injured by the US-Israeli attacks on Iran since then. According to Iran's health ministry, this figure is, according to Iranian Red Crescent Society, a total of 65 schools and 32 medical facilities have been targeted since the war started, and more than 10,000 civilian sites has been damaged. And the most horrifying moment of this war is that an unlawful US strike on a school in Minna, Iran killed 168 people, including over 100 children. The majority of those killed were girls between the ages of 7 and 12 years old. Amnesty International analysis indicates that a US-manufactured Tomahawk missile was likely used for this attack, a precision-guided missile used exclusively by US forces in this conflict. Girls, 7 years old, in a school, killed by a precision-guided missile. And the United States tells us it stands for human rights. And also, let's talk about Japan. A country whose pacifist constitution was written precisely to prevent the return of militarism, has approved a record defense budget, and on track to become the world's third largest military spender. It is developing long-range strike missiles, jointly building next-generation fighter jets, and easing arms export restrictions that stood for decades. This, ladies and gentlemen, is not self-defense. This is systematic dismantling of a post-war peace order carried out under direct American pressure. So I ask, who exactly is threatening the peace? Is it the nations building schools or the nations bombing them? Is it the nations building railways or the nations building military bases in 80 countries? Is it the nation pursuing diplomacy or the nations that sabotage negotiation to launch wars of choice? Here in China, we have made a very different choice. We have lifted over 800 million people out of poverty. Not through bombs, but through bridges. Not through sanctions, but through schools. But building is not enough if others are determined to destroy. And so today, starting from this forum, we have to say something that every nation must listen. We will not accept a world order in which trillion-dollar war machines are celebrated while billions of people lack clean water, basic healthcare, and education. We will not accept a definition of a security that means the expansion of one nation's military at the expense of every other nation's sovereignty. We will not accept a world where diplomacy is sabotaged hours before breakthroughs, where schools are bombed with precision-guided missiles, where little girls are buried in rubble, and we call that collateral damage. And we will not accept silence. Not while the blood of Palestinians flow in Gaza, not while the blood of Iranians flow in Tehran, and while the architects of this destruction sit in grand halls and lecture us about human rights. Let this be the generation that says, enough is enough. Enough hypocrisy, enough impunity, enough militarism dressed as morality. So let us choose, once and for all, not the power to destroy, but the courage to build. Not the arrogance of empire, but the humility of partnership. Not the silence of complicity, but the voice of justice, loud, unwavering, and unafraid. Because the world our children inherit will not be shaped by the wars we wage. It will be shaped by the peace we have the courage to choose. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. Very powerful statements you have made, and in fact, the very vivid recount of the history and also the modern sagas, which were unfolding themselves each day. Now, I know for the benefit of time, you will be also, due to the restraint of time, you will be attending the forum giving a speech at the Human Rights Council at 4 o'clock. See how long you can stay behind for a further discussion when we open the floor for discussion, okay? So stay behind as much as you can, but note your own timing. Thank you. Now, meanwhile, if we may just call appoint Mr. Raymond Wong, also from a experienced and senior media professional, to share with us his perspective, how, as a media worker, work in introducing and reporting the authentic news to the public. Okay, Raymond, I just give the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, philosopher George said those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. After World War II, these words were inscribed at the site of the Auschwitz concentration camp, serving as an eternal emotion for humanity to prevent the recurrence of historical tragedy. Today, we gather here not to dwell on past pain, not to perpetuate hatred, but to defend the dignity of human civilization and the truth of history. During World War II, Japanese militarism forcibly implemented the comfort woman system, a systematic form of sexual slavery that constitutes an extremely brutal chapter in human history. In the 80 years since the war ended, despite the repeated verification of extensive evidence by international experts, including Japanese scholars, the Japanese government has consistently evaded its responsibility and even attempted to deny these crimes. It has not only failed to make a formal apology or undertake responsibility, but has also mobilized a state paradise, attempting to downplay, deny, and even glorify its crimes against humanity on the international stage, regardless of the unequivocal evidence. This over betrayal of history constitutes a second violation of all victims and a blatant provocation against the international community's pursuit of justice. Today, we must expose their lies and restore the truth with the utmost seriously. My views will be presented in 4 parts. First, irrefutable evidence of systematic atrocities. Direct evidence, Japanese military archives. Document Ryukyuan Dariki, held by the Japanese Ministry of Defense, reference code C01000379100, reveals that in March 1942, the Japanese Southern Expeditionary Army Group requested the Taiwan Army to dispatch 50 comfort women to Borneo, with the operator to be selected by the Taiwan Kempeitai, which is the Japanese military police in Taiwan during World War II. The document bears the official seals of military affairs, military administration, and meritorious service, clearly indicating that the requisition of the comfort women was led and managed by the Japanese military, and that they were regarded as military supplies to reward soldiers, completely stripping the women of their fundamental human rights and dignity. Another Japanese military document titled Memorandum of Agreement between the Governor General of occupied Hong Kong and the Commander-in-Chief, 2nd China Expeditionary Fleet over security of Hong Kong and implementation of military government. Reference code C01000320400 confirms that within just 5 months of capturing Hong Kong, the Japanese military rapidly established a large-scale, strictly hierarchical system of comfort stations. This document was first discovered and disclosed by my newspaper, the Hong Kong Wenhui Bao. The Hong Kong Wenhui Bao News Investigation Department found many new evidence. So first Japanese military documents, such as the monthly wartime report and the regulation for the use of level comfort station by the 12th Space Force headquarters, show that comfort station were divided into 5 grades: crane, turtle, pine, bamboo, and palm, with access rights determined by military rank, cash payment prohibited, and epidemic prevention and hygiene matters fully controlled by the military. This completely contradicts the Japanese right wing's claim of private voluntary action. Collaboration by academic research. Professor Shu Ziyang of Shanghai Normal University, after 30 years of research, estimated that between 360,000 and 410,000 women were subject to sexual slavery by the Japanese military during World War II, of whom approximately 200,000 were Chinese. Through rigorous evidentiary screening, more than 2,200 comfort stations has been confirmed in the Chinese mainland alone, but a large number of suspected sites remained unrecorded due to incomplete trends of evidence. By utilizing aerial photograph, historical archive, telephone directory, and other historical materials, Professor Quan Ziman of Hong Kong Baptist University and his team have confirmed that specific location of 4-level comfort station in Hong Kong during the Japanese occupation, as well as numerous Japanese military clubs and assembly halls with a high suspicion of having been used for sexual enslavement. Confirmation by members of witness. Dr. Li Sufeng, former superintendent of the Hong Kong Sanatorium and Hospital, recorded in his memoir that after the Japanese occupation of Hong Kong, the chief medical official of the Japanese army, Colonel Izuchi, urgently sought advice on how to recruit 500 prostitutes, but the actual scale for exceeding that number, ultimately reaching the thousands. He personally witnessed that the Zhonghua Hotel in Wanchai, housing about 200 comfort women, exclusively for Japanese soldiers, while places like Situsen serve as a high-class facility for senior officials. Japanese war criminal Shigeru Harako, who served as deputy governor of occupied Hong Kong, also admitted that Japanese military designated an 800-meter street in Wanchai, where about 500 military brochures were established. On January 7, 1942, Hong Kong journalist Sa Kung Liang wrote in his Hong Kong occupation diary that poster advertising Japanese military comfort station appeared on the street recruiting military prostitutes with the words, "Name is start, a price shown." This indicated that within less than 2 weeks of occupying Hong Kong, the Japanese military had at least completed part of the setup of the comfort stations. These archives collaborating one another clearly reveal that the comfort station system was not a temporary or isolated phenomenon, but a cross-regional, transnational, and institutionalized crime of sexual slavery, organized, implemented, and strictly managed by Japanese militarism through state power. Second, the victim's blood and tears and the denial of secondary harm. Pen Zhuyin, an elderly woman from Yueyan City in central China's Hunan province, was abducted into a comfort station at the age of 15, subject to violent abuse, and still bears the physical scars. Her sister was stabbed in the abandonment by Japanese soldiers and nearly died for resisting. The appearance of this survivor, corroborated by archival records silently testified to that brutal history. Today, only 7 registered survivors of the convert women system remain in China. Their life testimonies are indelible evidence for human civilization. In 1993, Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary acknowledged the existence of coercion and deception in his corner statement. In recent years, however, the official website of the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs has blatantly denied the facts of forcible recruitment and sexual slavery. Right-wing groups have gone so far as to obstruct the inclusion of convert women. Historical materials in UNESCO's Memory of the World Register, forcing the international organization into a technical compromise. This organized denial and suppression constitute a second injury to the victim, betraying the very purpose of international institutions and undermine the international community's pursuit of historical justice. Third, characterized under international law. Under existing international law, the legal characterization of the convert women system is unequivocal. Article 1 of the 1926 Slavery Convention defines slavery as the status of condition of a person over whom any or all of the powers attaching to the right of the ownership are exercised. The comfort women system fully conforms to this definition. Common Article 3 of the 1949 Geneva Convention prohibits outrage upon the personal dignity, in particular, humiliating and degrading treatment and forced labor for civilians. The comfort women system clearly violating this article. Article 6 of the 1946 Nuremberg Principle, this enslavement and inhuman as crime against humanity. Article 7 and 8 of the 1998 Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court explicitly lists sexual slavery as a crime against humanity and a war crime. Article I of the 1968 Convention on the non-applicability of the statutory limitation of war crimes and crime against humanity states that those statutory limitations should apply to war crimes and crimes against humanity. Therefore, the comfort women system as a systematic crime of sexual slavery unequivocally consisted war crimes and crimes against humanity and is not subject to any statute of limitation. So I'll appeal. The comfort women system represents one of the darkest chapters in the history of women worldwide. As survivors fade away and historical materials face the risk of the dispersal, we have a duty to preserve the truth, promote education, and resist denial. We call upon the United Nations Human Rights Council to support the inclusion of comfort women historical materials in the memory of the World Register and to resist any political obstruction. Second, government of all countries to promote the closure and preservation of historical materials and to support transnational academic research. Three, museum and educational institutions to integrate the comfort women's issue into exhibition and curricula, cultivating value of the peace among the younger generation. Fourth, the international community to urge the Japanese government to face its historical responsibility, cease denying or downplaying the crimes, and offer a public apology to the victims. Dear colleagues, the silence of history has never been due to the absence of truth, but on the absence of those willing to speak there. Today, we raise our voice here, not for hatred, but for memory, not for revenge, but for justice. May this heavy memory serve as a carrier call for humanity to jointly safeguard peace. We will not remain silent. We will not forget. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Raymond, for giving us a very detailed account and also recount of the history concerning about the comfort women, what's all the pain and suffering that they had endured, and which was quite alarming to learn that over 300-something thousand to 410,000 comfort women have been called up, have been forcefully to go through the sexual enslavement. And that sounds horrific, and that really was a very painful part of the history that our ancestor had gone through. And we would have actually wanted to invite some of the witnesses who had gone through this sort of the enslavement to give us the first-hand experience story to us. But unfortunately, even if you try to count on the event happened in 1930 at the age of 12, that victim would now be over 100 years old. So it would be quite impossible for us to locate any survivors who could give us a physical recount of the story. But nevertheless, thank you for your presentation, which has given us a very which has actually broadened our view and bring back, although a painful memory, still we cannot forget and we cannot condone. Now, if I may just call upon our technician to present another video, presented by Mr. Byron Fija, who is a local indigenous Ryukyuan residents. And his presentation will be on the personal experience of Ryukyuan people, what sort of the political unfair and unjust experience that they had gone through. If I may just call a point for the release of the...
Correspondentのご相よ、初めて僕がビラ、ワンネフィザバイロンで一応ビ、うちなら町の、ルーチュ復刻可視化やいび、で、琉球沖縄県の話をしたいと思います。沖縄県というのはまず最初に、あまり沖縄県の政治家、このメディアもあまりというかほぼ言わないことをまず最初に、国連の皆様に説明したいと思いますけれど、まず何かというと、この沖縄県というのは日本の植民地です。そこから始めないと米軍基地の問題で、いろいろな我々琉球民族のことなどが、見えてきません。で、我々は、まず日本国内で一番勘違いされていて、我々沖縄県民というか琉球人も勘違いしていることが大きなことが一つあって、我々は日本人ではありません。日本人ではなく琉球人です。これが全く共有されていない。でも沖縄県民であるという事実はあって、日本国籍を持っています。この琉球人沖縄県民というのは。日本国籍を持つ人たちは日本国民なのですね。ですから私は日本人ではなく琉球人です。で、琉球人の中に沖縄人が一番マジョリティですけど、その中に奄美や、宮古八重山もあって、それぞれ独立言語があります。で、私は、日本人ではなく琉球人であり、さらに沖縄人、うちなんちゅと言いますけど、でもあります。しかし、日本国籍しか持っていないので、日本国民ではあります。ですから、国籍イコール国民。国籍イコール民族ではないんですよ。その国籍イコール民族が もう、ごちゃ混ぜになったのが日本の現状だから、アイヌの方々も、日本国籍を持っている人は日本国民ですけれど、アイヌの方々は日本人ではないんですよ。だから日本国の中にアイヌの方々が暮らしていて、日本国の中に我々琉球人も暮らしているということがまず前提として、そこを前提として考えない限り、もう何も米軍基地問題も何も分かりません。で、そこで理解してほしいのが、我々琉球人には琉球国という独立国の国民でした。それは1879年、明治12年ですけど、それ以前は、1609年に薩摩が侵略してきて、実は1609年から1879年までの270年間は、中国と朝貢関係にありましたけれども、裏から、薩摩が支配していたというすごく歪んだ、歴史があります。まあ反独立国と言えるでしょう。でも1609年以前、琉球国の最初の正史が集団生還というのが、それ1650年に書かれたもので、羽地長州という人が書きました。で、その琉球国の最初の正式な歴史書です。集団生還。そこで王の系図があって、最初の国王は春天という名前が出ています。この春天という国王は、が即位したのは1187、1187年です。つまり琉球国の最初の歴史書に春天王が1187年に即位したと。そこから1609年薩摩に侵略されるまでの間、その間が本当の独立国で、1187年からさらに、何百年後かに1387年に、明が、朝貢国にとして、琉球にこの使者を、よこして、朝貢関係を結ばないかと言われて、我々は朝貢関係を結びました。その時薩東王です。で、1609年まで本当に独立国として中国と良い明と清ですけどね、と良い関係を結んでいきました。でも1609年からは薩摩が裏から支配している。で、薩摩はなぜで支配して、全て琉球国を薩摩のものにはしませんでした。なぜかというと、この琉球国と中国との朝貢関係にあって、その、中の利益をですね、薩摩裏から、要するに搾取したかったわけです。でも薩摩が直接支配していることが中国側にバレたら、中国は朝貢関係を、断絶これやめてしまうので、薩摩はそれでは、利益が搾取できない。なので琉球国を表向きは独立国のまま維持させたのです。っていう、そういう歪んだ歴史がありますけどね。とにかく692年間この薩摩この春天王から1879年までは692年間我々は独立国でした。でその以降沖縄県1879年に置かれて、で66年間日本が直接支配して、で66年後1945年に、日本は連合国に戦争で負けて、でその後アメリカが入ってきて、1945年から1972年まで27年間今度は米軍が、直接この琉球諸島を、統治支配しました。で1972年から現在なんですけど、この1879年、元は1609年ですけどね、直接日本が支配した1879年から現在2026年まで、で米軍支配も27年もありましたけど、これ約150年間で我々の琉球人の意見は全く聞いたこともないし、勝手に琉球国っていう沖縄県というものを置かれてっていう状況があります。で何が言いたいかというと、要するに米軍基地だろうが自衛隊基地だろうが何もかも日本人、その日本国の勝手に我々琉球人は、この主権から自分たちの自己決定権から歴史、教育、文化、言語、すべて 日本に奪われているということが現実です。それを理解していただかないと、米軍基地問題というものはそもそも米軍基地問題というのはないんですよ。これ日本が持ってきたもので、アメリカが勝手にここに座ってるんだって、我々琉球人は米軍に
And thank you, Mr. Brian Fija. No doubt his presentation is very contentful, I believe. Although I do not understand what he says, not a single word. I'm sure that the audience would share the same feeling. Nevertheless, we are duty-bound to broadcast his video. Due to the time constraint, we could not have been able to provide a subtitle to what he says. But nevertheless, we are so proud to have our assistance extended from our young and brilliant accredited national security speaker, Ms. Wincy Lee, to share with us the script that is to be read out in English. Now, Ms. Wincy Lee, please.
Statement by Byron Fija at the United Nations. Distinguished members of the United Nations, it is a pleasure to meet you for the first time. My name is Byron Fija. I teach the Okinawan language and I am a Ryukyu restoration activist. Today, I would like to speak about Ryukyu, also known today as Okinawa Prefecture. First, I would like to explain something to the members of the United Nations that politicians and the media in Okinawa rarely talk about. Okinawa Prefecture is a colony of Japan. Unless we begin with this understanding, it is impossible to properly understand issues such as the US military bases and the situation of the Ryukyuan people. There is one major misunderstanding within Japan. It is something that many people in Japan misunderstand, and even many Okinawan residents and Ryukyuan people themselves misunderstand it. We are not Japanese. We are Ryukyuan people. However, this understanding is not widely shared. At the same time, we are residents of Okinawa Prefecture and we hold Japanese nationality. People who hold Japanese nationality are considered Japanese citizens. Therefore, although I am not ethnically Japanese, I am a Ryukyuan person. Among the Ryukyuan people, Okinawans are the majority, but there are also peoples of Amami, Miyako, and Yaeyami, and each of them have its own independent language. I am not Japanese, I am Ryukyuan, and more specifically, I am Okinawan, which we call Uchinachu. However, since I only hold Japanese nationality, I'm also considered a citizen of Japan. Therefore, nationality does not equal ethnicity. In Japan today, nationality and ethnicity are often confused and mixed together. For example, the Ainu people also hold Japanese nationality, so they are Japanese citizens, but they are not ethnically Japanese. Within the state of Japan live the Ainu people, and within the same state live the Ryukyuan people. Unless we begin with this basic understanding, the issue of US military bases cannot be properly understood. What I would like you to understand is that Ryukyuan people were once citizens of an independent country called the Ryukyuan Kingdom. Before 1879, there was a complicated history. In 1609, the Satsuma domain of Japan invaded Ryukyu. From 1609 to 1879, for about 270 years, Ryukyu maintained a tributary relationship with China, while being secretly controlled by Satsuma behind the scenes. This created a very distorted historical situation that could be described as semi-independent state. However, before 1609, Ryukyu was truly an independent country. The first official history of Ryukyu Kingdom, called Chuzan Saikan, was written in 1650 by Haneji Choshu. It records the genealogy of the kings, and the first king listed is King Shunten, who ascended the throne in 1187. From 1187 until 1609, Ryukyu functioned as a truly independent kingdom. In 1387, during the Ming Dynasty, China sent envoys to Ryukyu and established a tributary relationship. From that time until 1609, Ryukyu maintained good relations with China as an independent country. After 1609, however, Satsuma controlled Ryukyu from behind the scenes. Satsuma did not completely annex the Ryukyu kingdom because it wanted to exploit the profits from Ryukyu's tributary trade with China. If China had discovered that Satsuma directly ruled Ryukyu, the tributary relationship would have been cut off. Therefore, Satsuma allowed Ryukyu to appear as an independent kingdom while secretly controlling it. In total, from King Shunten until 1879, the Ryukyu kingdom existed for about 692 years. In 1879, Japan abolished the kingdom and established Okinawa Prefecture. Japan directly ruled the islands for 66 years. In 1945, Japan lost World War II to the Allied powers, and the United States took control of the Ryukyu Islands. From 1945 to 1972, the US military directly governed the islands for 27 years. From 1879 until today, 2026, for approximately 150 years, the voices of the Ryukyuan people have never truly been heard, and the system of Okinawa Prefecture has been imposed upon us without our consent. What I want to emphasize is this: whether it is US military bases or Japanese self-defense force bases, all of these decisions were made by Japan and the United States without the consent of the Ryukyuan people. Our sovereignty, our right to self-determination, and even our history, education, culture, and language have been taken away by Japan. Therefore, the so-called US-based problem is not originally our problem. These bases were brought here by Japan, and the United States continue to maintain them here. The Ryukyuan people have never invited the US military to our land, and we have never asked Japan to turn the Ryukyu kingdom into Okinawa Prefecture as part of Japan. As of 2026, the rights and human rights of the Ryukyuan people continue to be deprived through the actions of Japan and the United States. Earlier, I said that I am a Ryukyuan restoration activist. I use the word restoration, not independence. What I hope for is the restoration of a democratic Ryukyu state, not a monarchy. Activists like myself are extremely rare among the Ryukyuan people. Many people simply treat what I say as the strange opinions of one individual. However, throughout history, many movements for human rights have begun with a single voice. Therefore, even if I stand alone, I wish to bring this issue before the United Nations. I also hope that members of the international community, including representatives such as those from Hong Kong, will come to understand the true history of Ryukyu and the reality that the human rights of the Ryukyuan people have been taken away. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wincy, and thank you for giving us the English text of what Mr. Brian Fija have said in his local dialect and native language. Surprisingly, I also make the confession myself, had it not because of the English translation, I would not have been able to understand what Wincy has just presented during 1887 up to 1609. Ryukyu island has been a truly independent kingdom, and also the voice of Mr. Byron Fija is now heard clearly and loudly, and they have their own thinking, and they would like to have the sovereignty that they used to enjoy. We marked it here, and then in fact that's very educational indeed. Now, if I may just go back to the comfort women issue again, Miss Pansy Hold has already recorded a short video to recount Hong Kong's trauma under the Japanese occupation, 1941 up to 1945, highlighting the sexual violence and also the forced displacements and enduring scars inflicted upon the elder generation. If I may just call upon the video to be shown now.
Distinguished guests, dear friends, hello everyone. The world has slowly recovered From the devastation of World War II, even though I was born after the war, I grew up listening to the elders in my family recounting the profound horrors of that time. My own father was forced to separate from his family during the dark 3 years and 8 months of the Japanese occupation of Hong Kong. These disturbing facts and stories of the war victims are the devastating accounts of millions of shattered lives. The scars of war take generations to wash away, while the United Nations and the forces of globalization have fostered immense progress over the past 8 decades. Today, we witness a deeply concerning regression. Unilateralism and armed conflicts are reappearing across the globe. We see millions of people displaced. Most of them are women and children. We see the social fabric of communities torn apart, inflicting a profound and destructive impact on the foundation of healthy families. This brings us to the core of today's IPLSA conference. Law and justice are not just abstract concepts. They are the shields that must protect the vulnerable. Yet in times of conflict, women often bear the deepest and most suppressed pain. When the guns finally fall silent, this specific suffering of women is too often swept under the rug in the name of moving forward. To build an indestructible defense for international security and women's rights, we must confront history with unflinching honesty. The comfort woman system implemented by the Japanese military during World War II is a heartbreakingly dark chapter. This was not a random byproduct of war. It was a calculated, institutionalized system of abuse. In Hong Kong and across Asia, countless innocent women were brutally torn from their families and forced into military sexual slavery. They endured extreme violence, the complete deprivation of their bodily autonomy, and the theft of their futures. They were treated not as human beings, but as mere commodities in a theater of cruelty. For decades, survivors swallowed their trauma in silence, shouldering an unjust sense of shame that was deliberately enforced by their captors, which would turn into a lifelong psychological illness. It wasn't until the 1990s that a few brave souls finally broke that silence, showing unimaginable courage to demand the truth. Tragically, most have now passed away without ever receiving a formal apology or the justice they do rightfully deserved. Yet, we must understand that unhealed historical trauma does not simply vanish when the survivors are gone. It mutates into intergenerational trauma. When history is ignored, or worse, distorted by unsettling revisionist narratives, it inflicts secondary trauma on the descendants and the community. When textbooks erase their tears, or when public figures deny their existence, it sends a dangerous signal. It suggests that women's suffering is inconsequential. This invisibly yet deeply undermines contemporary women's sense of security, telling society that crimes against women can be forgotten if enough time passes. We are not seeking revenge, nor do we demand that the present generation bear personal guilt for the atrocities committed by their predecessors. True justice is not about creating new victims. It is about breaking the cycle. Rather, this is an open invitation for all of humanity to collectively confront the shadows of our shared history. Acknowledging historical truths is a two-way healing process. For the victims and their families, it restores their humanity and soothes their souls. For the descendants of the perpetrators, it offers the profound relief of living in truth, liberating them from the exhausting burden of defending the indefensible. This shared honesty forms the absolute prerequisite for building genuine mutual trust between nations. As we step into 2026, global defense budgets are hitting record highs. We're increasingly measuring our safety by the thickness of our armor and the sophistication of our weapons. In this traditional narrative, emphasizing military might, women's forces, and human-centered needs are continually marginalized. But what good is a heavily fortified border if the society within it is broken? We call for a new paradigm of leadership, one not reliant on weaponry, but built upon human rights, unwavering honesty about history, and the robust protection of vulnerable groups. True security does not come from the battle of a gun. It comes from societal harmony, free from fear and unentangled by the unresolved concerns of the past. My friends, as the Global Summit of Women pointed out, the major trend of a shared destiny for the international community will not change. Healing intergenerational trauma is the historical responsibility and the answer our generation must shoulder. Let us bring the concept of security out of the barracks and back into our communities. Let us build our future not on the erasure of the past, but on the courage to remember it. Respecting the women of the past is the only way we can truly protect the women of today. Let us begin this work today so that our next generation, our daughters and granddaughters, can move forward freely in the bright sunshine of respect and love, unburdened by the shadows of unhealed trauma. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pansy Ho, for giving us a short speech on the about the comfort women. Now, if I may just turn to the last but not the least guest, sitting on my right, Mr. Kenwick Yam, who is a practicing barrister in Hong Kong, formerly worked in the civil service and subsequently joined the private practice. And he especially expressed interest in area of this part of the history concerning about the militarism and expansionism. If I may just invite Mr. Yam to give us his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ho. The relationship between the US and Japan has essentially been one between a master, that is the United States, and an agent, that is Japan. Particularly, Japan has been acting as an agent for the US expansionism to undermine China. Historically, modern relations between Japan and China can be broadly divided into the following three phases. Phase one is from 1894 to 1931. After more than 2 decades of development following the Meiji Reformation, Japan defeated the Qing Dynasty China in 1894 and emerged as the rising Asian power. The Meiji Reformation itself was actually triggered by the arrival of American black ships, which shattered Japan's policy of national isolation. But the question is, why did the US, a country rich in resources and minerals, came to seek the opening of a small island nation market like Japan? Japan has no resources at the moment, and where the people could barely feed themselves. The answer is, of course, is not that simple. The real reason was that the then old world was dominated by the European powers, including England, Germany, and France, whereas as the United States, as the representative of the New World, needed an agent in Asia. Japan was struggling to break free from the shackles of its ancient history at the moment, which perfectly fit this requirement. Consequently, the US did nothing to stop Japan's westernization at the time. So in 1894, when Japan defeated Qing China and extracted massive territorial concessions, the US did not intervene or raise any objections. In 1900, when the Eight Nations Alliance invaded Peiping because of the Boxer Rebellion, the US only sent a few hundred soldiers, while Japan deployed the largest army force among the Eight Nations. Had the United States not provided tacit endorsement, Japan could not have acted so vigorously. In 1904, acting as America's vanguard, Japan went to war with another ancient Greek power, Russia, and defeated Russia, and seized all of Russia's interests in Northeast China. In 1914, Japan fought against another European power, Germany, and occupied Qingdao of China. As a result of this, most of the world's dominating powers' interests in China were seized by Japan. Phase 2, from 1931 to 1945. After the success of the Northern Expedition, China was reunified in 1928, a development that was clearly not to the liking of the United States and Japan. Japan struck again and launched the September 18 incident to occupy all of Northeast China. Following the July 7th incident, full-scale war broke out between China and Japan. During the war, China requested the US to cut off Japan's oil supply, which could have forced Japan to cease hostilities, but the US refused. But you might also wonder, if Japan was acting as an agent for US interests, why did it launch a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor? The answer is actually quite straightforward. This wolf hunt raised by the US sometimes turned to its master. However, even after Japan's unconditional surrender in 1945, following the full-scale war between the US and Japan, the US did not impose death penalty to this wolf hunt, which had been loyally devoted for the majority of the time. The US only amended the Japanese constitution and supported Japan's continued growth. Phase 3, from 1945 to the present. After Second World War, the Korean War broke out and Japan became a logistical base for the US, leading to explosive economic growth. However, Japan did not always enjoy the full trust of the US, as evidenced by the 1985 Plaza Accord. The US forced the yen to appreciate sharply to prevent Japan from threatening its status as the world's leading economic power. Politically, however, Japan has been far more loyal to its master. This may be due to Japan's historical anti-Chinese political stance, which is why Japan has never formally apologized for the war of aggression against China, which claimed the lives of 30 million Chinese military personnel and civilians. Among Japan's post-war prime ministers, only Tomoichi Maruyama ever formally apologized for the invasion of China. However, this apology was immediately dismissed by the Japanese government as merely Murayama's personal stance, and subsequent prime ministers such as Shinzo Abe has gone so far as to enshrine the self-defense forces in the Japanese constitution and dispatch the self-defense forces to overseas missions. Now, the conclusion is that, therefore, the current Japanese Prime Minister denied Takaichi's erroneous stance that an incident in Taiwan is an incident in Japan is not a mere slip of the tongue, but rather a continuation of Japan's consistent political stance, acting as an agent for the US to infringe upon China's interests. So consequently, it is foreseeable that Takaichi will not retract her remarks. However, her statement, her remarks have absolutely no legal basis. The US continues to use the first island chain comprising Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines to contain China. Although Japan no longer openly invaded China by force, it continued to act as an agent to undermine China's interests. It also intends to subvert the post-World War II international order by resuming the overseas deployment of the self-defense forces and developing nuclear weapons. These actions threaten not only China, but also other nations that were invaded by Japan during the Second World War, such as North Korea, South Korea, and other Southeast Asian countries. Well, at the end of our conclusion, we want to say something about the Ryukyuan people's wish. We understand that the peoples of Ryukyu do not wish to continue serving as agents under the banner of Japanese expansionists. They deserve the support of all righteous people around the world to call for their autonomy and recognition of their historical rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanley, for offering such an inspirational perspective. In fact, the analysis that you had offered to us can scarcely be seen in any proper historical text. And thank you for your contribution. Although, I have to say that, there's a caveat. Things, mentioned in your presentation is I think is open for examination.
Yes.
It's a food for thought over for the general audience for sharing, and also to read into some events which have been reported and taught in history book. That is another perspective. That is another way of thinking to provoke critical thinking. But still, things have to be researched on to look for the truth and authenticity. Thank you very much. And in fact, I thank you for the great contribution. If I may just open the floor briefly, because for this, in the interest of time, we are just overrunning the program for about 10 minutes now. See if there is any question raised by, only one question, okay? I'm just reminded by the MC behind or the director behind. Okay, one question. State your name and then read your question out, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ho. My name is Po Wan Chang. I have a question for the panel here, which is as follows. Given that Japan has never formally apologized nor paid reparations for its plundering and atrocities to China in its war of aggression against China from 1931 to 1945, would its current actions, such as in significantly increasing its military budget, be even more alarming?
Right. Now, I endeavor to answer these questions, okay? If there is anything to be chipped in by other panelists, please do. If I catch your question correctly, Bowen, in fact, it is a common concern that a country who is ever on an increase of its military budget, same feeling shared by other countries as well, when China also have this sort of the same spending. Now, when we look into the problem or the questions, how we perceive the Japanese increase of the military budget. I think there's a stark difference between China and Japan. China has been the underdog, for the last 200 years, and we had no aggression towards other neighbor country. And if you just understand it from Wincy, who has just read out the English text of Mr. Fija, Ryukyuan has been our neighboring country. We let them in peace, and they have also been enjoying their own independence and sovereignties for almost 400 years until the time when Japan, exerts the influence over them. Now, judging from the record, China has been keeping towards themselves to resolve the problem by themselves internally, rather than reaching out into other territories with a view to seek and to take minerals and resources from other countries. So therefore, this is quite clear in history. So therefore, when we consider the issue, China incurring also the military expenses and the budget, we have to look into the circumstances and environment, and also as compared to the track record of the Japanese, which is a total different issue. And as I've just also pointed out in my opening, in 1967, the former Prime Minister announced that there was 3 principles, namely, without introducing nuclear arm, without not to make or manufacture nuclear arm, not to retain or possess any nuclear arm or weapons. Now, these 3 principles are openly declared to be abandoned by the incumbent Prime Minister. Against all these backgrounds, of course, we have the legitimate fear and concern over the conduct that the Japanese government is engaging into. The path that they are walking towards is clearly fortifying the territorial expansionism and also the militarism. That's how I feel it. And in fact, exactly this is the purpose why we arranged the discussion today. It's not to provoke, it's to explain the situation and arouse public interest and attention, to look into the issues in the proper context, and also free from any so-called the adverse influence which may be exerted by somewhat media control. And that's, while we are approaching with this sort of question, we approach it with the objectivity and fair mind, fair view, but also look into the history with an approach with it, approach it with the critical thinking as well, and to find out the truth as much as we could. And also in that context, we will not forget the pain and suffering that our former and the previous generations has endured, especially the comfort women. It is a hard fact that over 410,000 women have been captured, caught, to go through the sexual enslavement. And this is the fact that cannot be removed and cannot be undone. And this is how I answer your questions. Stanley, do you have any view to offer?
With respect to the question?
Yes.
It was just briefly, definitely a build-up of military. I would just be concerned about what is the intent, and then with them trying to amend Article 9, I mean, there's just certainly seems like there's a movement to be utilized at some point.
Yes.
Or attempted.
So this is the questions we try to address to, hoping that we have satisfied your curiosity. Now, finally, ladies and gentlemen, as a matter of fact, what we discussed here today, and also the scripts, I promise, the full length of the video clips will be uploaded into the website of IPLSA for the sake of, and also benefit of those who have touched on and listened to our discussion and would like to examine in greater detail and length. So therefore, we will just upload all the informations and the text and the speech today, okay, before we catch our flight back home. I apologize for the hiccup which happened during the session. Nevertheless, it was not really that serious. We overcome it in time. Now, coming to the end, of course, the challenges before us in light of the expansionism and also the militarism are formidable. The legacies of all this, whether contemporary or historical, continue to inflict profound suffering and erode the hard-won gains of the international human rights framework. The examples laid bare today from Venezuela, Iran to Okinawa, and the unresolved trauma of the comfort women illustrate a pattern of impunity and a disregard for human dignity that threatens global peace and security. IPLSA stands resolute. We demand rigorous international accountability for violations of human rights and international law. We call upon all to prioritize the safeguarding of collective human dignity above the narrow political interests. Let our deliberation today be marked by clarity, courage, and unwavering commitment to this essential goal. Now, there's a joint statement. I would like to publish it at the end of these discussions. If I may just read it out for everybody. To all nations, abiding by the Charter of the United Nations and upholding the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, complying with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and International Covenants on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, it is not allowed to occupy the territory of other countries by illegal or military means. Respecting human rights and protect lives, safeguarding the rights and interests of women and children. This is the shared value of the world, and all countries must join hands to safeguard the world peace. Thank you. Thank you all.